Kicking off the list at number 10, Pedestrian Crossing. Okay, I see this far too often in the city. People just walking across the street whenever they want. They do a little wave, a little smile, and then they just jaywalk right in the middle of like a highway. Everybody's slamming the brakes, and old Peggy Sue is just crossing wherever is most convenient for her. It's not fair. Well, Article 40 of Beijing's traffic laws stipulates that drivers in motor vehicles can't just suddenly stop, even if it's at a crosswalk. Yeah, so if somebody's about to walk at a crosswalk, they have to wait until drivers go by. It's forbidden to stop at these crossings, and if you do so, you're risking a fine. Hopefully, just a warning. Just a warning not to stop at crosswalks. It's kind of weird. That's an odd slap on the wrist. Hey, I noticed you stopped. Don't. See ya. Number 9, never nude. Okay, how do I word this one here? We've all heard about it in some way, I'm sure. You know those websites that we visit after the sun goes down? Maybe you're scrolling through Reddit even, some random threads pop up, you're like, okay, sure, that's not what I clicked. It happens. I used to download music from the internet. The things I've seen in pop-ups alone, horrifying. I have to wash my eyes. Well, in China, the government monitors the internet, so none of the adult content really makes its way to your eyes ever, even if you wanted it to. You get what I mean? Anything scandalous is censored. Objectionable material as well, just in general, won't make it to the screen or even the book. Yeah, you can't even write about being nude because they'll toss literature right out. Only think dirty thoughts, don't say them. Number 8, born this place. The hukou system is an interesting one. When you're raised in a small town, you can't wait to grow up and move. Maybe it's the city life for you that you yearn for. Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe you're sick of hearing trains go by every morning and you want to head to the country and hear some crickets. Having the choice to visit and move back and forth, rent out these places, that's a privilege. Depending on where you were born in China, you may be limited to the areas that you can and can't move to. You might literally be stuck living in the country. The government monitors every single citizen, so if you spend more than 3 days away from your residence, you have to register for a temporary residential permit. They have the system in place so that residents can't just all migrate at the same time to cities and then cause a food shortage. Number 7, family time. Chinese culture centers heavily around respecting your elders. That's a huge element. And really, we need to enforce that everywhere, if I'm being honest. That's a great law. Yeah, I said law. Back in 2013, China introduced an elderly rights law, meaning they're not being neglected anymore. You don't visit Gam Gam, well, you're going to the slammer. Loneliness among the elderly is a major issue, so companies will even allow time off to visit your parents. My heart feels warm knowing this, honestly. My first job was at a retirement home and I used to love it. I used to keep my headphones out, I used to talk to all the old ladies, all the old dudes. I was like 16 years old, I was a garbage guy. I would do recycling. It was the best. I love talking to them. They're lonely. Talk to them. Adults are legally required to also stay in the loop, not just visit, shake a hand or two, and then leave. No, you have to spiritually connect with your elders in China. You can't just phone it in, literally. If you feel bad now, hit that thumbs up and go call your grandma. Number 6, unauthorized reincarnations. Yeah, this one's fun. China's authorities created a law so Buddhist monks can't be reincarnated there without legal permission, of course. Always gotta get legal permission, even to reincarnate. The State Administration for Religious Affairs believes that this was an important step that they had to take. This was put in place to limit the power of the Dalai Lama. So 2 separate Dalai Lamas might be chosen in the future. Yeah, like Captain America, different timelines. This is insane, hear me out. Beijing's view of the current Dalai Lama, the 14th, he's now 86 years old, and he said that when he was 90, he would make the choice whether or not he would be reincarnated, which could end a role that's been in Tibet Buddhism for over 600 years. So yeah, like I said, it's a big deal. That's where laws come in play and make this whole process tricky. The government, they're trying to limit the power of the Dalai Lama since he's been living in exile in India since the late 50s. So we could have Beijing's approved Dalai Lama that was, reincarnated, and the one identified by Buddhist monks. 2 different ones. So if you're planning a reincarnation anytime soon, well, you better get approval from China first. The people of Tibet are very unlikely to accept a Chinese Communist Party appointed Dalai Lama. Number 5, work friends. This next one's a little lighter, and honestly, if this rule was in place over here right now, well, a lot of my friends wouldn't have jobs. You can't date coworkers in China. Yeah, and what's even better than that is that if you date somebody, sometimes your work will assess who you're dating, like outside of the field, and then they have to approve of them. That's amazing. This internet company in China, their dating rule in the workplace got leaked. And let me read some of these rules out, and then let's see if we agree here. Rule 42, males who have been employed for less than a year and females who have been employed for less than 3 months are prohibited from finding a boyfriend or girlfriend in the company. Okay, you gotta bust some tables first. Rule 43, female employees who have found a boyfriend outside the company and have decided to have relations with him must take the initiative to tell their superior. Only if the relationship is fitting for the company can she then continue to be employed, and those who fail to report are directly expelled. So if you worked for Pepsi, Carol from Coca-Cola's accounting would be a no-go. Get what I'm saying? Rule 44, male employees under 25 are restricted from finding a girlfriend in the company. Hashtag grow up. Rule 46, frequently changing boyfriends and girlfriends within the company is prohibited. Those who have changed more than 3 times will be permanently expelled. So choose wisely. Number 4, one-child policy. Immediately darker. This one was phased out recently, but I have to bring it up. Introduced in 1979, the Chinese government made this rule where a majority of couples could only have 1 child. This was done to control population growth, but of course, from a human rights point of view, things got a little dicey. See, come 2015, things didn't magically change, it just switched to a 2-child limit. And then finally, come 2021, it's completely phased out. The government saw this plan as a way to keep things running smooth, but in doing so, they reduced the fertility rate. And there ended up being a labor shortage because seniors needed those kids, as in the only one of those kids, to take care of them. No one was left to work, see what I mean? As per point number 7. Number 3, tickets please. Medical systems are different everywhere, and in China, having that many people, things have to run smoothly. It's a must. There's more often than not a wait line for most commodities. They have something called healthcare tickets over there. Honestly, I kind of agree with this. I'm pretty on board. If you're looking to see a doctor, you gotta buy a ticket first. Like a movie, a really slow, boring, coughing a lot movie. You can buy these tickets like you would movie theaters through an app or through a website, whatever works best. Because if you don't have a ticket, it would be an extremely long wait time just to see a doctor and talk and then plan something. After they bought a ticket, patients can register it to a specific doctor that fits their needs, rather than wait in a room full of sick people all going to the same person, that slow process that I'm used to over here in Canada. This way, patients in China can just go specifically to the doctor that they need, rather than get referred over and over and over again and wait in these long lines. Do you agree with this fast pass system? Sound off below. Number 2, busking. Here in Toronto, we have Busker Fest. It's amazing. My friends perform in it. It's loud, it's full of energy. It's an outdoor variety show. If you've been to any major city, at one point you've seen a kid butchering an Ed Sheeran song. That's busking. Buskers are common, and in Hong Kong, they're really not. You're not allowed to whip out a banjo, throw down a hat on the sidewalk, and start improvising with locals. It's an offense to play any musical instrument in the streets. So keep that tromboning to yourself. And finally, number 1, banned. To cap this list off on laws you didn't know about, I figured I'd just rapid fire a few things that are banned in China. All your favorite things. Most of them are websites. Google is a no-go, YouTube as well, so you won't find my face over there. And speaking of face, Facebook too is banned, which honestly isn't really a total loss. Reddit is not allowed, so say goodbye to your late night scrolling. Netflix too is blocked, so no more binging and Netflix and chilling. Wikipedia, blocked. Zoom was blocked for a hot minute. Messenger, of course, being part of Facebook, or I mean Meta, is blocked. So if you wanted to block somebody, you couldn't because Messenger was blocked. I'm saying block a lot. We're all blocked. No more local rappers as well spitting bars on your newsfeed either because SoundCloud has been blocked for 8 years. I'm on board with this one. This one's fine. Until podcasts came out, we're like, okay, drop those. When we're done with scripts here, we toss them in Dropbox. I'll never take Dropbox for granted again because over there it's blocked. Imgur has been blocked for a couple years now too, so no more GIFs. GIFs? GIFs. GIFs. Definitely GIFs.
Starting off this countdown, we have the weight. In 2008, a law was introduced which made it mandatory for citizens between the ages of 40 to 74 to have their waists measured regularly. Women can only be 35.4 inches and men can only be 33.5 inches. If you are found bigger than that, then you have to lose weight according to this law. Not only that, but you might even be subjected to fines. I mean, Japan is known for their low obesity rate, and this is one of the factors as to why. In our 9th spot today, we have the ice cream. Now this is a very bizarre law. Basically, it's illegal to put ice cream in mailboxes. First off, who in their right mind would even think to do something like that? Like, I'm done with this ice cream, where should I put it? The garbage? No, the mailbox. So this law was implemented after a postal service worker put a chocolate ice cream in the mailbox in 2006. Since then, it's been made illegal and offenders are subjected to a hefty fine. You could be imprisoned for up to 5 years or be fined around 4,000 USD. In our 8th spot today, we have your neighbor's mail. Now, I'm sure this has happened to you at least once, but you go home, you check your mail, then you realize that the envelope has your neighbor's name on it. Oops. The mailman delivered your neighbor's mail to your address, so you're like, no problem, I'll just walk to their house and pop it in their mailbox. Boom, wrong, no, arrested. In Japan, it's illegal to hand your neighbors misaddressed mail to them. This is featured in Article 42 of the Postal Law. Basically, they have this in place to protect the privacy of both the sender and recipient. So if any mail that's not yours accidentally gets in your mailbox, you have to send it back to the post office and then they handle it. Which seems like a lot of work when they literally live next door to you, but sorry, that's just how the law is. In our 7th spot today, we have the divorce law. This is another pretty wild law. So if you're a woman and you get divorced by law, you have to wait 6 months before remarrying again. And if you give birth to a child during those 6 months, the child is legally your ex-husband's. As for men, well, they can just remarry instantly. Now, there actually is somewhat a reasonable explanation behind this, somewhat. So let's say the woman does remarry instantly after divorce, and then she finds out, oh no, I'm pregnant. Well, how would she know who the father is? So the 6-month rule is in place so that it's going to be clear who the kid's father is. In 2016, the law was amended. Now the law is women can remarry immediately after divorce as long as they aren't pregnant. If they are, then they have to wait 100 days to remarry. And a child born within 300 days of divorce is still legally considered the child of the original husband, even if it's not his. In our 6th spot today, we have the married couple. Now, most married couples do live together, but in Japan, they must. It's illegal for married couples to live separately unless they have a just cause. Now, why is this a law, you may ask? Well, it was passed to prevent divorce rates from spiking. If you're living away from your partner, the separation might take a toll on your relationship. But like I said, most couples do live together after marriage, so it's not that big of a law. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with indecent exposure. In Japan, it's illegal to expose your thighs or your bum in public. The law was passed in 1948 under the Light Crimes Act. However, this law is rarely enforced, and most women still like to wear miniskirts in public. But if the cops are really out looking for people, then you could be arrested and put in jail for up to 29 days. While we're on the topic of legs, crossing your legs in Japan is considered very casual and improper. In Japan, you are expected to sit tall with both feet on the floor and never cross your ankles over your knee. But don't worry, there's no law surrounding this, so you won't be arrested for accidentally crossing over your legs. It's more so a manner thing, you know, it just can be perceived as rude. In our 4th spot today, we have smoking. Now, most people smoke outdoors and think that's the proper place to smoke. Well, not in Japan. Outdoor smoking is actually banned in Japan. The only place you can smoke outdoors is in designated smoking areas. But smoking is prohibited on the main streets. If you want to smoke, it has to be in these designated areas. They do this to be courteous of the people who don't wish to partake in smoking. What else might surprise you is that many restaurants and bars let you smoke inside. In our 3rd spot today, we have drinking. In Japan, you are allowed to drink in public. It's one of the few countries where it's fine to walk around with a beer in hand. In fact, they even have vending machines that sell alcoholic beverages in public. That being said, if you're hammered walking around the streets and being rowdy, you can be arrested. That's a no-no. Plus, drinking is usually an evening activity, so it's frowned upon if people see you walking around with a drink at like 10 in the morning. Moving on to number 2, we have the walkie-talkies. Okay, so you're planning your trip to Japan. You got your essentials, you got your underwear, your toothbrush, your toothpaste. Did you bring your walkie-talkie? Now I know what you're thinking. Who would want to bring a walkie-talkie with them to Japan? Don't ask me, maybe you have kids that get lost easily and it's too expensive to have an international phone plan. Well, if you're planning to bring walkie-talkies, think again. It is illegal to own walkie-talkies bought from another country. Now, this actually has a really good reason behind it. Japan relies heavily on their radio network to relay important information. Any foreign walkie-talkies can possibly interfere with their signals, so they made them illegal. If you're caught with one, you can face 1 year in prison with fines up to around 9,000 USD. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the dancing. For the longest time, dancing at public venues was illegal. That's right, dancing was illegal. The only place you could dance was at venues with a special dancing license, and you could only dance until midnight. It was illegal as soon as it struck 12. They did this in 1948 as a way to try and get rid of prostitution in these dance halls. Just recently they changed the laws so you can dance after midnight, but the venue has to keep their lights on. So as soon as it's midnight in Japan, the lights turn on if you want to keep dancing. If venues don't follow this law, they could get in serious trouble. Alright guys, that's all for today's video. Let me know in the comments below where you are from. Do I have any viewers from Japan here? If so, let me know about these laws. I'm actually fascinated.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Little White Lie. The Yurnamu Code is a code or a group of Sumerian laws that were drafted sometime between 2100 and 2050 BC. This is so long ago. Of course things were really different, but there are some laws and rules from that time that really make you go, what? One of these is the bizarre one that pertains to kidnapping. Of course, kidnapping is never good, and they knew that back then, but they were a little more liberal or forgiving when it came to certain scenarios. So basically, according to these rules, kidnapping was punishable by but only if both the kidnapper and the kidnapped were free men. If the person who was kidnapped was a slave, the sentence was just a monetary fine. Okay, that's pretty messed up, but it's not necessarily all of that bizarre to hear about the mistreatment of slaves in history. I mean, I said slaves. It was bad from the get-go, and this rule was certainly no exception. But it gets even more bizarre from here. If the person who was taken was a woman, well, I mean, a little white lie and you're good to go. By this I mean, should the kidnapper just claim that the woman had been found in the street alone without a companion, this was enough to get off scot-free because, I mean, how could he possibly know whether or not she belonged to anyone? Yeah, that really was the thought process back then. You see what I mean when I say it's just a law that makes absolutely no sense? Kidnapping is bad. It's so bad we'll put you to death, but like, it's only kinda bad when it's like this. Just kidnap the right way and we'll have no issues. In our number 9 spot today we have royal fish. This is one law that came into existence because someone was feeling a little greedy. Since 1324 it has been decreed that all beached whales in the UK belong to the king or queen, and we can all thank Edward II for this weird one. In 1324 he passed a law defining whales, sturgeons, dolphins, and porpoises caught within 5 kilometers of the shore as quote royal fish. These fish collected a lot of money in medieval markets, and those who were wealthy wanted these fish for their special feasts and banquets. Of course, instead of purchasing them with your riches, what do? Well, you just make up an insane law so that you can steal them, of course. What's even crazier is that this law actually hasn't been repealed, and in 2004 there was a fisherman who caught a 10-foot sturgeon near Wales, and he actually had to ask Queen Elizabeth's permission to sell it. Apparently she told him that he could use the catch as he saw fit. In our number 8 spot today we have the Flamen Dialis. In ancient Roman religion, the Flamen Dialis was the high priest of Jupiter. There are other forms of flamen or high priests, and many of them had bizarre rules surrounding them that they had to follow, but these are some of the strangest. Among the rules set out for the high priest of Jupiter, there were rules that forbade them to touch iron or flour. They were not allowed to ride a horse. Okay, this is weird so far, but not like too bad, right? Well, they also had this rule where if a prisoner enters their home, they must be released. Then their chains must be taken through the hole in the roof and then from the roof dropped into the street. That sounds both weird, oddly specific, and like a lot of work for no reason. The rules don't end there though. The Flamen Dialis also was not to touch or name a female goat. No flame could be carried out of their house unless it was for sacred purpose, and there must be a box of sacrificial cakes at the foot of his bed. This is actually just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the rules these people had to live by. Many of the rest really are just as curious and bizarre. I'll say this, the life of a Flamen Dialis certainly must have been anything but boring. In our number 7 spot today we have Draco's rules. Draco of Thessaly has often been considered the author of the very first laws of Athens, which came around 621 BC, and some of the very first draconian codes were very simple. The jury is out on whether or not they were effective, but it was definitely clear. It goes basically as follows. Did you kill someone? Penalty. Did you steal someone else's goat or whatever animals they had in ancient Athens? Penalty. Did you accidentally forget to pay your taxes? penalty. You get the idea. You commit a crime? Well, that's it. No second chances on this guy's watch. That's literally it. You're done. Sorry, you should have thought of that before you committed a crime. Also, there's some crazy things that were considered crimes back then, so I can't imagine. Anyway, thankfully his successor wasn't quite so harsh and changed basically all of that, except for the whole death penalty for killing someone thing, which, like, fair. At the very least, it's quite a bit more reasonable. In our number 6 spot today, we have marital infidelity in Mesopotamia. Hammurabi was an ancient Babylonian king, and he ruled Mesopotamia from 1792 until 1750 BC, and during his reign he produced some of the earliest legal codes in history. He created what became known as the Code of Hammurabi, which consisted of 282 laws, which were listed in a sort of if-then kind of format. Each law was distinct to a social class, and the punishments were specific to the type of infraction. There were many bizarre rules here, but one of the strangest parts were the different punishments for men and women, specifically in regard to marital infidelity. So basically, men were allowed to have extramarital affairs with maids, servants, slaves, you know, of course. Women, however, what are you, crazy? Any woman found philandering and their secret lovers were punished by being bound and tossed into the Euphrates. I'm gonna go ahead and say it. Call me crazy, it's just a little bit of a double standard. I don't know, maybe I'm just too futuristic for Mesopotamia. In our number 5 spot today, we have a punishment worse than This is more so a punishment for breaking the law rather than the actual law itself, but it's something that I didn't know previously and I found exceptionally interesting. This comes from the Qin dynasty and it involves something worse than the death penalty. You might be wondering how something could be worse than the death penalty, and to that I say, great question, here's how. The penalty could be intensified based on the method that was selected for it. Like, sometimes the person who had committed the crime would end up having their entire family executed. That's probably the worst thing I can imagine. Sometimes the criminal, if sentenced to death, would then have their body exposed in the marketplace or their head mounted on a pike, which was meant to disgrace their death. Not only these after-death humiliations, but sometimes pre-death torment also occurred. So yeah, surprisingly, the penalty can actually get worse. In our number 4 spot today, we have nope. Okay. This is a disgusting one. I'm sorry we're talking about it, but it's what the video calls for. This law comes from the ancient Anatolian people who formed an empire between 1600 and 1180 BC. This law is about what happens when a person does something to an animal. I don't want to say it, so we're probably thinking the same thing. It's messed up, you get me. So, this law explains that the punishment for this crime depends on what animal it was with. A dog or a pig? No way, buddy. Not on our ancient watch. That's punishable by a horse or a mule? You're a messed up dude, and for that, you never get to appear before the king again. He can't even look at you. A cow? Well, here's the thing. The king is going to decide what happens because this one needs to be taken on a case-by-case basis. See what I mean by this law that makes no sense? I'm glad that they were at least punishing people for this back then. I think we can all agree that that's the right thing to do, but it's just very strange that it differed depending on the animal. You know? In our number 3 spot today, we have who's to blame. Okay, we've been having a silly fun time for most of this list, despite the various bizarre laws that have existed, but this one is definitely a little more serious, and it's one that, especially as a woman, is definitely a touch infuriating. This law comes from Nessalem, another one of the laws by the ancient Anatolian peoples. So basically, this law starts off a little better than it ends. It has to do with when someone harms a woman. Normally, under this law, this would be punishable by death. This is where the law goes a bit awry, however. That is the case only when the crime is committed abroad. At home, however, oh, total free-for-all. If this crime happened at home, of course, the woman was actually guilty. Not only that, but she would then be condemned to death instead of the person who did that to her. I actually couldn't believe it when I read it. Things simply were just different back then, and I truly feel grateful that this isn't a law that has stuck around. It does make me feel exceptionally bad for the women who found themselves victim to this insane rule, however. In our number 2 spot today, we have the roast battle. This is perhaps one of my favorite laws, and it's one I think we should bring back. This is officially my petition. This law is hilarious with just a little less harsh of a sentence. You'll see what I mean. This law comes from ancient Rome and the law of the 12 tables, and basically it condemned anyone who sang a joking or mocking song about someone else to. But the sentence only came if what the person sang was untrue. If you just roasted the hell out of someone and everyone turned around and said, well, where's the lie? Then there's no problem. Carry on, you little musical genius, you. I mean, at least they were taking a stand against bullying all the way back then. I just think it's insane that the law is so extreme. Like, a little silly ditty that's just part of a rumor mill is an absolute no-go. Don't tell the ancient Romans about magazines and tabloids or diss tracks. They'll be so mad. In our number 1 spot today, we have the innocence test. Another one of the rules that comes from the Code of Hammurabi is one that forces accusers to prove their accusations indisputably. Okay, they have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. We still go by that, so that's not really that weird. What is weird, however, or maybe dramatic is a better way to put it, is that if they failed to do this, they would then be condemned to biggest Uno reverse card in history. Like, even knowingly false accusations probably shouldn't be punished with the sentence, but imagine just not having enough evidence to convince everyone and then you have to die because of it? Like, it's not like DNA testing or photos or videos existed, so how do you prove these things in a way everyone will believe you? It seems way too risky to even try. Also, one of the methods used to try and test someone's innocence is to throw the accused into the river. If they drowned, it was because the gods knew that they were guilty, but if they managed to get out alive, they were considered innocent, and then their accuser was executed for falsehood. Like, I'm not taking the chance on whether or not this guy can tread water.
Starting off this countdown, we have the pests. One very important thing to know about Antarctica is that its ecosystem is pretty fragile. This is due to climate change, loss of biodiversity, human impacts, and the accidental introduction of non-native or alien species. Somehow, we as humans have introduced 121 types of fungi, 72 invertebrates, 8 mammals, and 3 bird species. Now, there are even worms in Antarctica. This is why Antarctica has a don't pack a pest rule. This means that before coming to Antarctica, everything you bring must be thoroughly washed, decontaminated, and inspected. This is to make sure you don't got any tiny seeds on ya. They'll even hoover you just to make sure. It's pretty intense, but it's done in order to protect Antarctica. Moving on to number 9, we have no souvenirs. So you took a trip to Antarctica and you want to take something as a memento to remember your trip by. Too bad, you're not allowed to. Taking anything home from Antarctica is banned. That includes a small pebble from a beach or a small bird feather. You can't take any kind of biological material home. Now, the reasoning behind this is that there are around 10,000 scientists operating there. They don't want you accidentally taking a fossil home with you or something. You also can't take any equipment you find randomly, even if it's unattended, because chances are it's research equipment and that would be stealing. There's no finders keepers rule in Antarctica, sorry. Moving on to number 8, we have the lichen. Believe it or not, but plants do grow in Antarctica. When people think of this continent, they think of it as a cold, barren place, which is fair, but several types of grass, moss, and lichen grow there. One rule that Antarctica has is that you are prohibited from walking on the lichen. Now, it's because that it takes such a long time to grow, and if it gets damaged, it'll take an even longer time to repair itself. And it may not look like much, but it's vital to Antarctica's ecosystem. In our 7th spot, we have the rescue. Now, Antarctica is pretty freaking big. It's twice the size of Australia, and it has the lowest recorded temperature on Earth. Not only that, but there's not a lot of people living there, which is why, if you're in danger, don't expect to be rescued. It sounds depressing, but it's just realistic. And with Antarctica's unpredictable weather conditions, rescues are basically impossible. Tour groups literally will tell you not to stray away. If anything happens to you, you're kind of SOL. This place might be beautiful, but it's harsh and full of unseen dangers. In our 6th spot, we have the no guns law. Antarctica is a demilitarized zone, meaning absolutely no military activity can take place there. This means that there cannot be any military bases or structures of any kind, and absolutely no weapons testing. With that comes the no weapons law. No firearms or explosive devices are allowed there unless you have been given direct permission. Now, officials in Antarctica do have a firearm, but it's locked away in a glass cabinet in the station master's office. It's a 12-gauge shotgun, and it's only used in emergency situations. According to a local, the only time the station master used this gun was when a man was chasing another man around town with a butcher knife, shouting something about aliens. The next day, the station master was seen escorting this man, who was placed in a straitjacket, onto a plane to get him out of there. He had his gun with him as protection. Other than him, you're not allowed to have any firearms in your possession. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the dolphins. Dolphins are cute, right? Maybe you want to go out whale and dolphin watching and you just want to get close to them. Well, don't. There is a rule in Antarctica that states you must leave the dolphins alone. This includes sailing a boat directly into a group of dolphins to try and get them to bow ride with you. Now, they have been known to do this on their own, but it's forbidden to harass these mammals in an attempt to get them to do it. Not only that, but Antarctica is home to hourglass dolphins. These types of dolphins are very rare and not yet threatened, so they want to keep it that way. In our 4th spot today, we have the wisdom teeth removal. Turns out that you gotta get your wisdom teeth removed before going to Antarctica. This is mainly important for people wanting to stay there for a while or those that are going to work there. If you're doing a quick visit, then you don't really gotta worry about this. Now, having your wisdom teeth removed lessens the risk of having a medical emergency since medical aid is very limited there. But not everyone needs to have them removed. You have to undergo rigorous medical and dental exams before going to Antarctica. So if it's found that your wisdom teeth won't be a problem, then you don't have to have them removed. In our 3rd spot, we have the nuclear weapons. Antarctica is a nuclear-free zone. You know, just in case you were thinking about bringing a nuclear bomb or something with you, you can't, I'm sorry. On top of that, it cannot be used for testing nuclear weapons. A treaty was made when test explosions were being carried out in the South Pacific. They were scared that Antarctica, being largely deserted, was going to be an area where people also wanted to conduct nuclear testing. But this treaty prohibits them from doing so. You're also not allowed to use Antarctica for the disposal of nuclear waste. Moving on to number 2, we have the appendix removal. If you're going to Antarctica for an extended period of time to visit, live, or work there, there's just one tiny little thing you have to cough up. Your appendix. Yeah, you heard me. Anyone there for a long time has to get their appendix removed. Now, this is because the nearest major hospital is 1,000 kilometers away or 625 miles. And there are only a few doctors on base and none are specialist surgeons. So if something goes wrong with your appendix, they won't be able to help you. Now, there are also doctors available in the research bases. Again, none of them are surgeons who can operate on appendixes. Also, let's say something severe does happen. Medical evacuations take a lot of time and effort and end up putting everyone else at risk. So they make people get their appendix removed as a preventative measure. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the jurisdiction. Now, the jurisdiction of Antarctica is confusing. And that's because Antarctica doesn't belong to anyone. There's no single country that owns Antarctica. So when you visit, you're under the jurisdiction of your own country. Same with the researchers working there, regardless of which national station they may visit. So when there, you are subjected to the laws of your country. If you break any of the rules of the Antarctic Treaty, you face the laws on that when you return home. Same thing goes if you commit a crime there. You face punishment when you return home.
Number 10. Approved haircuts. If you're a fan of going to the barber and being able to style your hair however you like, then you won't like this rule. In North Korea, both men and women are required to have one of only 28 government-approved haircuts. There are 18 different styles for women and only 10 for men. Younger men are also required to have hair no longer than 5 centimeters, while older men can get away with up to 7. Women are also typically expected to have a shorter style if they are married and a longer style if they're not. The list notably does not include leader Kim Jong-un's current hairstyle, and that is because no one else is allowed to share the same hair and look as their leader. All the styles appear incredibly neat and straightforward, likely due to North Korea's importance on their image and presenting themselves as a well put together and normally functioning country. Not a single hair out of place.
Number 9. Elections. As we all know, North Korea runs under a type of dictatorship, with Kim Jong-un having total control over the country. The citizens are not allowed to choose who they have governing over them. So then, why do they have elections? That's right, like most other countries across the globe, people of legal age show up to a voting center and cast their vote on who they think is the best fit. While in countries like the United States and Canada, people have a choice on whether or not they actually want to exercise their right to vote. In North Korea, however, every single person over the age of 17 is required to show up on election day. Everyone is expected to turn up early, meaning there are usually lines longer than your DMV, and when you get inside, you're given a ballot, with only one name on it. You do not tick a box or fill anything out, you simply take the ballot and hand it in. While you theoretically could cross out the name, this would result in the secret police coming after you. Everyone then gathers outside and has a celebration, putting on a show of happiness and loyalty for being able to elect their leader. Number 8. Names. When you were born, it's most likely that your parents gave you a name. They had the freedom to give you just about any name they could come up with, and as a result, there are some people out there who didn't particularly like the name that they were given. But don't worry, as we know that we have the freedom to get our name legally changed if that's what we wanted. However, citizens in North Korea have a little bit less choice when it comes to their title, as with many other things in their lives. Throughout the ruling of the Kim family, it has always been illegal to have the same name as the current leader, and the same remained true when Kim Jong-un took over for his father. An uncovered document said the following: all party organs and public security authorities should make a list of residents named Kim Jong-un and train them to voluntarily change their names. Authorities should make sure that there is no one making unnecessary complaints or spreading gossip regarding this project. As in North Korea, citizens are expected to never speak out against what is going on in the country, or else they and their families will face harsh punishment. Number 7. Gaming. I decided to sprinkle in a few South Korean laws in this list, as most of us are already aware of the backwards and harsh ways in the north. Those of us who like to stay up into the late hours of the night and play games like Fortnite or Minecraft would probably be devastated if we had to live by what is known as the shutdown law or the Cinderella law. In South Korea, the Youth Protection Revision Act forbade children under the age of 16 from playing online video games between the hours of midnight and 6 a.m. However, kids can get around this by instead just playing console or mobile games. But we all know that late night gaming on comms with your friends is where the true fun is to be found. Many children and their parents complained about this law, saying that it went against their rights and freedoms, but the Constitutional Court of Korea rejected the complaints. However, as of August 2021, the rule has been abolished and the children of South Korea are free to game again. Number 6. Students. If you already hated going to school as a kid, then I promise you, you would hate going to school in North Korea 10 times more. And not just because of the harsh rules and disciplines present within the country. While your parents probably hated going back to school shopping and having to spend all their money on your pencils, erasers, and binders, they actually had it pretty easy. Students that are attending school in North Korea are required to pay for and provide their own desks and chairs, and even have to pay money towards the heating of the school buildings. So while you probably had a desk that wobbled and an overly squeaky chair a few times, hey, at least you didn't have to pay for it. If you're a standout student though, you could be able to attend a special purpose school within the country. These being for children who appear to be exceptionally talented in things like academics, music, and sports, as they want to raise the best children to represent their country and boost their image. Number 5. Tattooing. Let's head back down south of the border again and take a look at another weird law from South Korea, this one being in regards to having tattoos. When you're walking downtown in your hometown or any other city, you may notice that there are plenty of neon signs advertising places where you can receive tattoos. And while some of them may look a little sketchy, most tattoo artists are pretty well trained and know exactly what they're doing. In South Korea, however, they require a lot more training. In fact, you can only get a tattoo from a licensed medical professional, as the process is seen as a medical procedure. This makes South Korea the only developed country to have this law. Despite the legal implications, there are still around 50,000 operating tattoo artists who are risking fines of millions of dollars and multiple-year prison sentences in order to put art on people's bodies. And while there are strict rules in regards to tattooing, it's not illegal to have a tattoo. It's more just seen as taboo, and you may not be allowed to enter certain spaces if you have visible tattoos on your body. So I guess if I ever go to South Korea, I'll just need to pack a lot of long sleeve shirts. Number 4, religion. When we look at a history of the communities that are often referred to as cult-like or other strict affiliations, we often see that they are typically based on heavy enforcement of religion, like the FLDS or even Jonestown. So it might confuse some outsiders to learn that practicing religion in North Korea is completely banned. While the Constitution says that the citizens have the freedom to practice religion, we know that freedom isn't really a word that exists in that country, and people are prevented from practicing to their choosing. The country being considered an atheist state. People are expected to completely devote themselves to their leader Kim Jong-un, so there's really no room for religious practice there. While religion is banned, many people in the country apparently do believe in spirits and ghosts and shamanism, or human communication with the spirit world, and it's a very common practice among the people, reportedly most often popping up in the form of fortune telling. Defectors often communicating with and reaching out to spirits for advice on when they should attempt to bring the rest of their family across the border. Number 3, Sunday. As can be assumed, North Korea has a heavy emphasis on labor and constantly working. Adults and children alike are often forced into labor and putting in long hours for really no returns. It was even reported that orphan children were volunteering to work in mines and on farms. Knowing this, it will probably come as no surprise that even the weekends aren't a time for rest. While you might spend your Sunday afternoon sleeping in and playing video games, North Koreans spend their Sundays on a mandatory Labor Day. They often do cleaning around the house and are required to do all the work by hand. And speaking of labor, expecting mothers are also required to go into labor and birth their child completely alone, and cannot meet their husband or family until a week after the birth. Just a little side topic there. Number 2, defamation. Another South Korean law on the list. Let's take a look at their laws surrounding defamation. I figured this one was particularly topical due to the recent trial that I'm sure we're all aware took place. In countries like the United States and Canada, it's incredibly hard to actually prove a defamation case and be able to win it. But in South Korea, it's actually the opposite, and they have very strict laws surrounding it. In most cases, defamation comes from false allegations that negatively impacted the person that they were about. In most cases in South Korea, however, you can be found guilty of defamation even if what you said was 100% completely true and proven. Many people see this as their way of silencing critics and protecting powerful businesses and people, but the people who do support it say that they are simply protecting their right to privacy and not having their personal information shared. Number 1, disrespect. As the government forces the citizens of North Korea to see Kim Jong-un as their divine and just leader, no disrespect against his name, image, or really anything about him at all is allowed, and doing so can result in a very severe punishment to both you and your family. Citizens of North Korea are required to have a portrait of their present and past leaders hanging up in their home, and they will even send around inspectors to make sure. One woman was faced with a terrifying situation when her home caught fire. She ran back into the flames and smoke in order to save her 2 young children. So she's a hero, right? Well, not in the eyes of the North Korean government. She is actually facing jail time because in saving her children, she allowed the portraits of the leaders in the home to burn in the fire. In the case of an emergency like a flood or a fire, you are expected to prioritize the portraits and will only be considered a hero if you manage to save them from destruction. Another situation happened where a political member of the country was severely punished for falling asleep in a meeting with Kim Jong-un.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have no beard. Peter the Great was the Tsar of Russia, and during his time in this position, it is said that he really admired some of the cultures of Western Europe. Because of this admiration, he introduced a lot of Western styles of dress to his court, Western art, Western architecture. You get it, the whole shebang. On one of his visits to the West, it is said that Peter realized that there weren't many beards in the West. They weren't really as popular, and he didn't see as many people sporting them. This of course was quite the contrast to what he was used to. I mean, at the time in Russia, it is said that beards were quite popular in all types of people, and it is said that this was because at the time a beard was seen as bringing a man closer to God, so of course people wanted to sport them. Peter saw this difference and decided it was time to put an end to free beards. What I mean is that he introduced a beard tax that pretty effectively made having a beard illegal for most people. Those who could afford this tax were given tokens that showed they were allowed to keep the beards, and those who had a beard without a token would be held down and had their beard shaved in public, which just might be one of the weirdest things I've ever said. In our number 9 spot today we have pies. Okay, so apparently there's a rumor that England once banned the eating of mince pies, and while it's not the full truth, that did actually kind of happen. So basically, eating mince pie has been illegal in England only at one point in time. The reason behind this is because at this time, everything Christmas related was being banned because Christmas Day fell on a day of fasting. During this time, Oliver Cromwell had come to power after the execution of King Charles I, and his government was trying to at least downplay, if not ban, everything to do with Christmas, and this included eating mince pies. So during all of this, it wasn't completely illegal to eat a mince pie, but it definitely wasn't promoted. The closest they came to outlawing mince pies would have been in 1656, but thanks to the restoring of Charles II to the throne, mince pies are now free to be eaten wherever one should choose. Now I want a pie. In our number 8 spot today we have no football. Football, or soccer if you're Canadian like me, is truly an ancient game, but despite the fact that people have been playing it for centuries and centuries, it has had a bit of a rocky history and has actually been banned on several occasions in England, as well as in Scotland and France. It is said that the first official ban of the sport was in 1314 when King Edward III decided to ban it within the London city walls because he had received complaints from merchants that the sport was causing disturbances in their business. Other monarchs would also go on to ban the sport, mostly on the grounds that it interfered with archery practice. In 1424, the sport was banned by King James I in Scotland, and the punishment was a fine of 4 pence. All in all, it's safe to say that football has had a bumpy ride to get to be the beloved sport that it is today. In our number 7 spot today we have sloth. This is a law that was seen and followed by the Inca. It is well known that the Incas had quite a wonderful and advanced civilization, and that is certainly no easy feat, especially for the time period. This is exactly why, while this rule might be a little extreme in our modern times, it definitely makes more sense for the time period and where it comes from. This rule was about laziness and how it was really looked down upon. Lazy people would deprive the Sapa Inca of their work, and the punishment for this was hefty. Laziness was punishable by death. So, don't eat that extra bag of chips on the couch. In our number 6 spot today we have no insults. Okay, so this is a law that comes from the time of Vikings, and it of course has to do with insults. I mean, they definitely took them quite seriously. So basically, if you hurled insults at someone, they were entitled to compensation, and they could summon everyone else who's on the road to be the witness. If you spoke bad of someone during the Viking Age, even if the person wasn't there, it could ruin their reputation, and because of that, you need to pay them for the possible damages. It doesn't even matter if the insult was true, either. Your reputation was how you gained employment, met friends. It was a really important thing that was not to be messed with. Also, if you insulted one man, you insulted his entire family as well, so that's like 20 people right there, one insult. There were some words, however, where a man would be allowed to kill you if you said them about him, so maybe choose carefully and think before you speak, if you're still a Viking. In our number 5 spot today we have the Holmgang. This is another Viking Age law that has to do with single combat. Basically, these fights called Holmgang were the easiest way to ascend the social ladder and get rich. So basically, if someone didn't show up for their fight, the other guys got to call him the worst of the worst insults 3 times over, because I mean, we know how terrible and detrimental that would be. But if they both show up, the match is on. If you weren't capable of fighting, you could have someone else fight on your behalf, like it's Game of Thrones and it's a trial by combat. I'm looking at you, the Mountain. The duel didn't necessarily have to end in death, although it could and usually did, but drawing blood was enough. Someone just had to surrender, but then who knows what people would say about you after. In our number 4 spot today, we have sandcastles. This is a law that is said to have existed in the city of Eraclea, Italy. Basically, the law states that the building of sandcastles is illegal. Honestly, I didn't know that sandcastles were a government concern, but here we are. It is said that the rationale behind this law is that banning sandcastles helps keep the public decorum or the public decency. To me, it just seems like they made a law for the sake of making laws, but I'm just wondering what the punishment for it would have been. In our number 3 spot today, we have no sway. The Theodosian Code is one that was written in 438 AD, and one of these rules was a strict no solicitation policy. What I mean by that is that it forced all Christian churches to submit to the Catholic Church, and if they refused to submit, the penalty would be being considered a heretic. If someone tried to convert someone away from Catholicism, well, real trouble would ensue. It's kind of ironic when you really think about it, but this law suggested that anyone who tried to sway someone away from the Catholic Church would receive a penalty of death. Honestly, I'm starting to wonder if you could do anything in ancient history that didn't end up with a death sentence. Don't get me started on sandcastles. In our number 2 spot today, we have the veil. So this law is one that comes from the Asura Code, which is a compilation of Assyrian laws that were written about 1075 BC. This law was in reference to women and how a woman that was considered honorable should cover their faces in public with a veil. This meant that women who weren't considered honorable definitely were not allowed to wear veils, because how else could you tell the difference? You would think that they would focus on anything else, but apparently this was a very serious crime. If a woman who wasn't supposed to wear a veil was found wearing one, she would receive a swift and harsh punishment that would see her having her clothing removed, receiving 50 lashes, and then she would see herself condemned to death. Yeah. It was a little overdramatic. In our number 1 spot today, we have no dyeing allowed. This is a law that seems to me like it might have been kind of hard to enforce, but that didn't stop people from trying. There apparently has been several places that made dyeing illegal throughout the centuries. It is said that the earliest known case of this law was seen on the Greek island of Delos in the 5th century BC. The island was considered to be a holy place by the ancient Greeks. This meant that the entire island needed to be purified in order to make it a proper place to worship the gods. In the 6th century BC, all the bodies and graves that were in sight of the main temple on the island were dug up and removed. That's how seriously they took it. To further this, the Delphic oracle decreed that all bodies must go and that the act of death was illegal on the island, as was giving birth.